Hello, welcome back to Higurashi. Just a quick note before we started, because I didn't notice this, but apparently we had the channel's 1 year birthday or anniversary or whatever you would describe it as on like January 20th. So I could have. So I totally forgot about that, even though I remember saying that it would be coming up soon. So, yep, that happened. So that's pretty cool. Just giving a big thank you for watching and stuff, and how the channel has grown from a borderline unwatchable Sano Yuta series to a not so stuffed but sometimes technical issues do occur in this Higurashi series. So we'll just hopefully this year will be just as good. Anyways, let's get started. It's exciting. We're gonna see Teichi attempt to murder the uncle for sure this episode. This chapter, not episode. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it a lot, right? So I just want to jump right into it and see how it plays out. I skipped that. There's nobody at school. I couldn't hear the playful voices of children. This was the first time I'd seen the school with such a lack of human presence. Still, I quieted my breath and looked around, not wanting to be unprepared. It had gotten darker outside, but it was almost like my eyes could see more clearly now. I made absolutely sure of my safety and then walked to the heavy construction machine I'd hidden the metal bat behind. I had a tinge of worry, a premonition that someone had found the bat and hidden it somewhere else as a prank. If that happened, would I take that as an opportunity to desist? If it really wasn't there, then the sensation of chilled metal. It was still here where I left it. It hadn't run away. Satoshi hadn't run away. He'd waited here patiently, for me.
待たせたな、サトシ。いよいよだが、覚悟はいいか?
Through the metallic touch, Satoshi grins at me in my hand. That's what I should be asking, you know. I did this last year already. You should be more worried about yourself.
上等だぜ、サトシ。目に物を見せてやろうぜ。
Satoshi's back got lighter and lighter, and fit into my hands like it was being absorbed. It didn't feel wrong to swing this. I could move it around so naturally, it was like an extension of my own right arm. Of course it felt like that. Satoshi and I were holding one bat together. Next, I would make the call to lure the man out. It wasn't a bad time for it. My friends were doubtlessly parading happily through the stalls. I hadn't considered where to make the call from. My house and Satoto's were pretty far apart. If I called from my house, I wouldn't make it. Couldn't I use the school phone? But, as I thought, the room was locked up and I couldn't get in. Shit. I'm so naive. You should have at least figured this part out. I couldn't call him. And just for that, was today all over? I'm sorry, Satoshi. And just as I cursed my own naivety, a miracle occurred. A bicycle came into the schoolyard. It was a familiar middle-aged man. Oh, the one from the Forest Service field office. Nothing we know of. Why? Wasn't today Sunday? Was he here to pick up something he forgot? Anyway, the forest officer went around back and felt around in his pocket, then unlocked the door and entered. Actually lucky for once, Teichi. Right, that's bad luck, considering that this might not go well anyways. The best possible coincidence. It had been Satoshi who saved me. It had to be Satoshi who saved me. The metal bat, through just my contact with it, told me this was a chance I couldn't allow to slip by. The sections for the forest office and the school were neatly separated. I felt the man head into the force office storehouse, which was so far in the back students weren't allowed into it. The door didn't match its fittings well, so it didn't close all the way, and the gap in the door opened slowly as if to lure me in. I took a deep breath and went in. I tiptoed along silently and stealthily and made it into the teacher's lounge. That was the only place with a phone. As I held my breath in the teacher's lounge, I heard the Forest Service officer walking back over. Then the back door clattered shut and was locked. I glanced out the window at the schoolyard and watched as the man got on his bike like nothing had happened and rode out the school gate. The school was once again emptied, becoming deathly silent. I waited for a bit to make sure the silence was the real deal, then searched for the telephone on the principal's desk. I fished Satoto's house phone number out of my pocket. Yes, the number in the class directory for Satoto had been one from their house now, where she lived with her uncle. I touched the dial with my fingers, and then thought for a moment about what to say exactly when he picked up. Despite how many times I'd gone over it in my head last night, now that I had my finger on the dial like this, it started to seep out of my mind like a cracked bucket leaking water. Simple would be best. More importantly, to say it straight and not sound suspicious. I counted off 3 heartbeats and spun the dial. Let's go. The call sound. Would Satoto's uncle pick up? Now, of all times, the hope that he wouldn't pick up, and the feeling of doom and the knowledge that I couldn't save Satoto if he didn't, whirled around in a vortex. Tepe. It was the voice of a grumpy man, like he had just woken up. He picked up. Say your name, so I know you're Hojo, you asshole. It would be terrible if I got it wrong. I made up my mind. I had all the initiative on my side. Here we go.
こちらは下根市沖宮警察です。北条さんのお宅ですか?
It really doesn't sound like an adult at all. I thought that would be one of the problems, but also I don't know, calling from an Ochinomiya police station. It might be kind of, isn't he like on the run from them? So that might actually just backfire completely, right? I was changing my voice, but did he really think I sounded like an adult? Would he believe I was the police?
Hi.
Ooh. Well, he sounds more attentive.
北条ですけど。
今、お宅のお嬢さんの北条聡子さんをこちらで保護しています。
え？聡子が？あいつ何かやらかしおりましたか?
He fell for it. I could tell by how tense he was that he didn't doubt my words.
詳しい事情はこちらにいらしてからご説明します。すぐにこちらへ来ていただくことはできますか?
Yo.
今ですか?
I don't know how he can't tell that's a kid's voice. Maybe he might think it's like, I don't know, a young female. Cause it'd be really, it sounds almost like a prank call.
風呂に入っちゃったからあんまし表に出たかないんですがね。
What? You don't want to come because you already took a bath?
はい、今すぐです。
すぐ。せったく。聡子のやつ何をしちゃったんですか?
Well, at least I thought he would be like suspicious that Satoto told on him. But it seems like he's just thinking that she did something wrong.
詳しい話はこちらでいたします。ではお待ちしていますのでよろしくお願いします。
ちょっと俺警察署がどこかわかんないんだけど。
Ooh, tell him to go through the path.
どこよ場所?
You moron! What the hell? The Ochinomiya police station. I don't know where it is either. Yikes. Aren't you from around here? Why don't you know that? A greasy sweat came over my body. Eventually, just as I was about to choke, he spoke.
消防署の隣でしたっけ? 遠いな。
Thank goodness he remembered on his own for me. I didn't care where the police station was, so as long as he left his house to get there and took the right path.
ではお待ちしていますので。
あ、俺警察行ったら誰んとこ訪ねればいいんよ。あんた名前は？
On top of that, he wanted to know my name. This might be a bait, Keiichi. I don't know. It's getting kind of suspicious. Though again, it's like suspicious but like realistic. Just leave your... On top of that, he wanted to know my name. Just leave your goddamn house already.
前橋と申します。では
Higurashi.
失礼します。
That was close. I almost thoughtlessly told him my real name. I managed to change the last syllable of it, but I put the receiver down like I was running away. My fingers were trembling and I was soaked with a tepid sweat. I wasn't just nervous about the phone call. With that call, everything had finally been put into motion. I left the stool. It was locked before, but it was easy enough to open from the inside. But I couldn't lock it again after I left. Oof. Yeah, I guess you can't waste time now, but that's a flaw. Though I guess there's no witnesses, so it's not too bad, but it is a little suspicious. Though again, they can just it can easily be like reduced to the guy just forgot to lock the door on his way out, right? The forester guy. I needed to rush back as fast as I could and ambush him. I zoomed back to the scene on my bike. If Satoru's uncle got out of town before I got there, everything would be over. He'd learned there was no one asking at the station named Maibashi, and things would get pretty messed up. As I returned at full speed, I passed a family wearing yukatas. They must have been on their way to the festival. Many people in Hinamizawa knew my face, but though I didn't know theirs. Even just passing them like this made me uneasy. But I didn't generally come around here, so those living in the area might not have known much about me. That didn't matter right now. I needed to get back as fast as possible. To control my breathing and to ambush the man. I don't know, I said abuse the man. Ambush is a much better word, huh? I hid my bike in a thicket and picked up Satoshi's bat, which I just left hidden in the shade. And then I held my breath waiting to see someone. I wondered if he still hadn't gotten here. Or maybe he went right out after the phone call and passed by here already? Or what if he like called back and then he found out that this was fate? That would really suck, huh? I couldn't figure out which it was and was set upon by an indescribable impatience. Calm down, Teichi Maibara. Even if he came out here already, he'd pass by here on the way back, right? The end result would be the same. It wouldn't change the fact that he'd die. He'd probably be coming on his motorcycle. How would I stop him then? I figured it would be best not to think too hard and just hit him as he passed or beat him out of his seat. It might be a little hard. I guess he wouldn't be going too fast on this windy path. If the path does look like this. The path was made of pebbles. If I hit him as hard as I could and made him lose his balance, he wouldn't be able to help falling. And then the chorus of the Higurashi stopped. The sound of a bike approached from far away. I couldn't tell what sort of motorcycle it was from its sound, but I'd seen it parked before, so I'd know. It was getting rapidly closer. It was almost here. If he just went a little farther, he'd cross into that thicket and appear in front of me. I'd take a moment to make sure it was him, and then I'd put my plan into action. The motorcycle appeared. A few easily identifiable characteristics told me it was Satoru's uncle's bike, without a doubt. Was it really him? Was it really Satoto's uncle? I wasn't making a mistake, was I? I looked at its characteristics again. Its color, shape, and most of all, the man's clothes and face. Those last feelings of hesitation, I did away with them. Satoto, now your Nini will end it, okay? Bonk? Let's see it. Closer, closer. The bite came closer. Let's go. Satoshi. Oh. Whoosh. I jumped out of the thicket. I used my shoulders to basically tackle the uncle on the bite with all my might. That was a weird Satoshi response, but we're just gonna ignore it for now. Oh, well, it was Tepe. He gave a dumb shout as his bite completely lost its balance. Finally, it fell, the bite scattering clouds of sand, and after spinning, it stopped. Her uncle tossed to the ground, didn't understand what had just happened, and groaned for a few moments, crouched on the ground. Ha, ha, ha. My breathing started to become ragged. No, I couldn't have this emotion. Some weird secretion crossed through my brain and nearly made me hallucinate. Her uncle was droning. Now was the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What was I doing? All the sounds in the world cut off. My mental chaos from a moment ago withdrew like a lie, and I could feel the temperature in my head rapidly cooling down. The tension in my muscles all went away like the strings they had been attached to had been cut, and I let my hands dangle at my sides. It wasn't quite like exhaustion. Have you calmed down now, Keiichi, my bro? Do you need to remember again why things got to this point today? Scrape, scrape. I stepped over the pebbled path, taking one step, another step, then another towards Satoto's uncle. The more I walked, the more my breathing calmed. The more I walked, and the more I felt my body cooling, calming, chilling with frost. Yes. At this moment, the sky had lost permission to live. I had just rescinded it. So he mustn't stay in this world any longer. If he lived any longer, if Satoto's misfortune continued, it would be my responsibility for having allowed him to live. I could feel the cooling substance going through my whole body, even down to my capillaries. Her uncle was at my feet now, still on the ground like an idiot. I smiled coldly at how ridiculous he looked. That's all it took for it to hurt? Satoto's hurt much more, and now you're gonna feel that. And, with your life, I'll make up for her pain. Bonk? Oops. Not yet. I erased all unnecessary information from my mind. I prioritized the murder of this man. Execute, execute, execute. Oh, bonked. Into funky music. Funky, chaotic music. Wham! Utterly calmly, I delivered my first strike to the back of his head. I wanted to get at the most effective spot. At least during the first moment, I'd have to attack him while he was at his most defenseless. And if he was hit in the head, he'd cover his head. It was a defensive reaction all humans made like machines. He used both hands to cover his head so he couldn't pick himself off the heap he was in on the ground. Like pounding a caterpillar into the dirt, I'd hit him over and over. If he covered his head, I'd hit him in the side. If he covered his body, I'd go for his head. If he rolled over, I'd strike his feet, his knees, his elbows. I didn't care where anymore. By just delivering one blow after another, I induced panic in him. I retained my overwhelming advantage, but I hadn't done nearly enough to deliver a fatal wound. Baby caps. Ranko skillfully pulled himself up on the ground and started to run like a fleeing rabbit. It wasn't a judgment he made after seeing my face and deciding whether to fight me. Right now, he was fleeing by instinct, just trying to escape from the threat that had presented itself. A counterattack from a more physically capable Uncle was what I was most concerned about. Excuse me. He may have run, but it wasn't all that unlucky. The odds were in my favor. Uncle didn't run away towards people, but ran off the path and into the woods. How pleasant that he would run in a direction where nobody else was. He was fleeing into a strange geography, like a rat that instinctively runs into tight spots over and over. Yes, he was no longer human. He was a rat. The blood vessels in my legs expanded, and my total oxygen supply increased. I lowered myself to gain the most explosive velocity I could. Without breathing, I became a wind-like shadow, and dashed. I crossed thickets, crushed dead tree branches underfoot, and dove through the wood like a bullet. He ran so cowardly, arms flailing as he went. After catching up to him, I didn't need so much as blink of an eye to strike him again. My senses, mind, and body were all sharpened purely to kill this man. This was the first time I'd felt like this. Well, this was the first experience I'd ever have killing someone. It felt natural continuing to do this for the first time. And that meant I had this much talent for killing. Or perhaps the act of killing was so simple that anyone could do it. Yeah. I didn't struggle or grow tired at all chasing the clumsily fleeing Uncle. No matter how much he ran, it was like trying to get away from his own shadow. He couldn't get away from me. I could easily aim at his back, his shoulders, and his head even from this unnatural stance. Each time I struck him, he wailed in pain and begged pitifully for forgiveness, but it didn't disturb my mind. I was neither excited nor plagued by hesitation like before. I felt sharp, like a carnivore. Of course, so did the Uncle, who was trying to run away because he didn't want to die. He didn't want to be eaten, like a herbivore running with all its might, trying to get away. Despite all the attacks, despite all the hits, he kept fleeing without even staggering. And despite the bad footing in the forest, he impressively never tripped over anything. But there's no need to admire that fact. It was simply proof that he was no more than an animal. If he was chased, he would run. If he was going to be killed... That's a phone. Let me close my door. If he was going to be killed, he would run. He bared his fangs at the weak, but couldn't oppose the strong whatsoever. He was lowly, vulgar, a diminutive animal. Such a puny little creature had harmed Satoto. Scar after scar to her body and mind, deep wounds that might not ever go away as long as she lived. Oh. My cold and calm emotions suddenly turned into bestial ones. My personality changed into something specialized for murder, purely to devour the diminutive animal before me. The Uncle gave a puny little shriek, covered his head, and ran. I'm impressed by how much you can run. Fine, run as much as you like. I will be your death. I will choose the moment at my leisure. Your legs will hurt, your lungs will feel about to burst, your head will hurt from lack of oxygen. If you feel this pain has become worse than death, then by all means, stop any time. Without turning back, suffocating on his terror and the approaching death, he just ran shamefully onward. He ran, but was chased, his head bashed with the metal bat, sweat and drool flying everywhere, blood clinging to him. From his mouth came sounds of coarse, irregular breathing and high-pitched screaming that verged on crying. And pleas for forgiveness to someone, I didn't know who. Each and every second was a second of atonement that I'd granted him. Now, run. then fall, moan, and die. Where did he even crawl out of anyway? You were never here before. If you were never here, you never should have showed up. If you never showed up, our lives would still be fun and enjoyable. We would have gone to today's festival, waited for each other, and gone to the shrine laughing. We would have been playing amongst the stalls right now. We'd be browsing the strange food stalls you only saw at festivals, trying to get prizes from goldfish scooping, ring throwing, or target practice. Mion would surely make it into a competition, and we as a club would have a grand time. And everyone would be cheering for Rita-chan's dedication dance, and everyone would say how fun it was, and it would give us energy for days to come. Fun, enjoyable, and funny, warm times spent with friends. And that would have happened, but it didn't, and now it was all smashed to pieces. There's no doubt that would be what the world was like if you never showed up. You were the obstacle, the mistake, the heresy in that world. But I would correct that mistake now. I would erase you and make it so this last week never happened. Tonight was the Tatarigoroshi festival, the holy night where taking just one life was permitted in the name of Oyashiro-sama's curse. It looked like the Higurashi stopped crying at some point. When the Higurashi cried, everything would end. And the Higurashi silenced. Lowly one, the hour of atonement is at hand. At end. The Higurashi have stopped their crying, thus it is the end. The end, the end, the end, end. You don't have to run away anymore. Die with those dirty brains of yours smashed everywhere. Go on. Boink. The final boink. Lightning and thunder struck like an explosion. It was so loud it shook the ground, and I smelled gunpowder. The response I got this time was clearly different from the one before. The metal bat crunched into the crown of his head, and it was like the top of his head caved in. The bat felt like it was biting him. It had been the final, killing attack that visited him. When I didn't overlook the opening, he left as his knees gave out under him. I remained alert for a few moments, then, thud. Thud, I planted both knees in the ground and then fell forwards, burying my head in the ground. I'd been holding back my rigid breathing, but now it all came out of me like a dam bursting. My head was dizzy in the light, and unable to maintain my balance, I leaned against a nearby tree. The uncle didn't try to guard his head any longer. After a disgusting sort of spasm, he stopped moving. Did I get him? Did I get him for sure? I fought back my exhausted urge to fall over where I stood and drew towards him carefully, bat still at the ready. It was possible he was faking it and trying to wait it out. Should I check for a pulse? I realized right away, though, how unnecessary that would be. If I thought he might be faking it, then I would just have to keep pummeling him until I was satisfied. I fought back my ragged breathing again, and then I swung my bat from above, far above, and brought it down. Clunk. His body leaped like a bow, but it didn't try and cover his head. Then once again I aimed for his head and swung. His reaction was the same this time. After spending a few moments making his head into mochi, the hits gradually started to feel different and started to spray filthy dark red liquid everywhere. That was enough. It was definite now. I had absolutely killed him. There's no sense of accomplishment, nor one of regret. I didn't feel anger towards the Toto's uncle, nor pity towards the Toto herself. Instead, right now, I was feeling like my heart had been stolen by the downpour. It had begun to rain at some point, and how comfortable it felt. The rainwater drenched my body and dripped down to the ground. The excitement within me faded as the rain washed away the grime. In exchange, my shoes were so wet they made splashing sounds. And despite abusing Satoshi's bat like that, it wasn't bent very much. There were a few dents in it, probably from hitting the man, but nothing that would make it seem different from before. Instead, it was stained with black, with red, with mud and blood. But that itself would be evidence. The one piece of evidence needed to prove that my delusions hadn't just been daydreams, that I ended Satoto's uncle for all eternity. Alright, Keiichi, calm your mind. The time for passion is over. Now is the time to be cold as ice. I needed to bury the body. But where was I? I simply followed the man as far as he ran into the darkness. I couldn't take a guess to as how far we'd run. It was already pitch black around us, and the only light I had to go on was the very faint lights on the road, a little further down. It was so dark out. I hadn't noticed the darkness until just now. My vision was so good I could see the man's ugly hairline. I could have counted the pores in his head. It was only now I realized how much crazy strength I had mustered at that moment. I went over to the streetlight. I looked up and down the road, desperately trying to figure out where I was.
ここは
Oh no. This was the one road connecting Hinamizawa to the town. We are unbelievably far away from Satoto's house. Had the two of us really run so far a distance? My surprise at that was accompanied by a knowledge of the miraculous fact that despite running so far and making so much noise, we hadn't come across anybody at all. There was a long way between here and the ambush location. I dug the hole. There's no way I could carry the body that far. Wait, aside from that, the bite the man took here was still lying in the middle of that path. That would be an issue. The police could tell whose the motorcycle was by looking at its license plate, and they wouldn't just leave it at that. Thankfully, the corpse was in a dark forest. In terms of urgency, dealing with the bike would come first, and I wanted to get the shovel back from where I'd left it next to the hole. I shouldn't trade the body there. I would have to deal with it right here. Fortunately, the ground was like mud from the downpour and was more sludgy here than where I was before. I might be able to dig a grave quickly here. Of course, my bicycle was still over where I'd left it too. It still wasn't over. Homicide had only been half my goal. The other half would be just as important as the first. I would completely hide the body, not allowing a beginning to happen. I would erase the man like he'd never existed and regain the peaceful times we had before. I bent my head backwards and calmed my mind even further. The big water droplets struck my brow mercilessly. They were actually quite comfortable, and for a while I let my desire have its way. After confirming that I was sharp again, I started running through the rain. The motorcycle was in the grass at the roadside. Considering how it looked, pelted with rain and covered in mud, it actually seemed like it had been lying there for a long time. The plan was to drop the motorcycle into the swamp. The swamp was a bit of a walk from here. I lifted the bike up. I didn't think it would be so heavy. I was a little surprised, but once I had it upright, it was fairly easy to roll it along. Still, pushing this thing all the way to the swamp was not something I wanted to do. I could no longer ignore my exhaustion, and it warned me numerous times how far this swamp was. This motorcycle, I wonder if I could ride it well enough. Once I got it going, it would be basically the same as a bicycle. Wouldn't it get me to the swamp quickly? A plan suggested by my exhaustion. The anxiety at getting on a motorcycle for the first time withdrew. I turned the key and then you just hit this pedal, right? Yeah. Vroom. It's on. And then I gripped the handlebars, the first the right, then the left. Maybe I twisted them too much. The bike lurched, and it did a wheelie like an angry horse. I lost it for a second, but it was just a problem of how much torque to apply. Let's try that again. This time slowly, gently. That time it went well. It was strange to be on a two-wheeled vehicle that would go even if I didn't pedal. Very odd, but I got used to it quickly. Mion once told me that you could get a scooter license within a day, and she was clearly right. This was pretty easy. I needed to throw that metal bat into the swamp too, but I didn't know how I would pat the bat onto the motorcycle. Without much of the choice, I stuffed it in the back of my shirt, feeling like a ninja carrying a katana. If I put the tip down on the seat of my pants and hunched over, it wouldn't fall out. I got back on the bike, and this time going without any difficulty. I carefully pressed the button labeled light, and a rather strong light came on, illuminating the way forward. I probably really shouldn't have turned it on, but I didn't have any way of seeing at this point, and had zero confidence I could ride through this darkness. As the rain came down on me, I maintained a precarious balance and inched my way towards the swamp. Along the way, I ran across a few people who seemed to be returning from the festival, but none of them had any interest in me, and they were either all sold through with the rain and hurrying on their ways home, or had their umbrellas low and their heads down. Yesterday I might have been wary of even these passbyers, but right now it didn't seem like much of a cause for concern. In fact, it would probably be less suspicious to be riding out here in the open like this instead of sneaking around. More and more, though, I started to think of the idea as naive, brought on by my exhausted state. I climbed a steep hill. On a bike, the hill would have put me out of breath, but as I just had to accelerate a little bit to climb the entire thing, motorcycles sure are convenient. For a moment, its lights illuminated a sign before I passed by it. Onidafuchi Swamp, good children do not play around here. Still, it wasn't like the way to the swamp was cordoned off by a metal fence or anything. Parents and teachers would get mad at you if they found you playing here at the swamp, but some of the bad kids in my class apparently snuck out here sometimes to see the giant crayfish in the place. They talked before about how they go to the candy shop, buy some pickled squid, then just tie it to a fishing line and throw it, and all the crayfish would come running. I'm already losing my sense of reading. Already that time, huh? Once I got up to the bank, there was a tiny ritual shrine and traditional ropes on one of the trees. And it swallowed the downpour hole. The blackened swamp had waited for me. If I slammed on the accelerator from the cliff-like stop I was on now, the thing would fly straight into the middle of the swamp. I had to be careful not to fall in with it. If I drowned and disappeared, man, what a stupid ghost story that would be. On the night of Watsunodashi, Satoto's uncle's corpse was found in a thicket by the road leading to town, and Keiichi and Maibra went missing. Wow, that goes perfectly with the thing. Wouldn't that be an interesting idea if I wonder if that works if I think about it. So the person who goes missing is the person who killed so like for the two-part murder, the person dead is the victim and the person who went missing was the culprit but then went missing for some reason. I mean, it works for the first one, right? The manager was in charge of killing the leader was in charge of killing the manager. That would mean Satoshi's mom was the culprit in killing the dad. And the third would be the wife was the culprit for killing the priest, which is actually like not that unlikely. That one seems kind of easy. And then Satoshi was the culprit for the aunt. So it's actually not bad. Not a bad way of thinking about it. That didn't really occur to me, I think. There we go. People would be whispered I've been demoned away. The 5th year's curse would be a half-baked one. I got off the bike and twisted the accelerator as hard as I could. I let go just when it seemed like it would drag me forward. The bike shot off the cliff and swallowed down into the swamp, leaving a far fainter splash than I'd imagined. Its surface was pummeled by the downpour, and muddy, filthy water was flowing into it. I couldn't even make out the motorbike I'd just thrown in there. It was pretty heavy, after all. It would be quickly engulfed by the soft mud at the bottom of the swamp, and it would be pulled deeper and deeper until it reached hell itself. I felt no reluctance whatsoever in throwing the man's motorbike down to the land of the demons, but I did have a tinge of regret for when I did it with Satoshi's bat. The muddy waters washed off the doors, sticking to it, and then it sunk easily. Alright, let's take a breather, because we just had the whole killing scene, so it went pretty well. Though I did predict that Keiichi would kill him, though I thought the uncle might have put up some resistance in fighting back, but it seemed pretty one-sided. Now all Keiichi has to do basically is, I guess, cover the hole that he made, because you don't just want a big hole in the ground, because that would be suspicious. Then he'd have to do the new hole and bury the body, which also might be hard. But yeah, I think the hardest part afterwards is gonna be maybe creating an alibi, or, because like I said, I think Luigi's gonna investigate this regardless, because he was already looking into Teppei, so that might be a little rough. But it went a lot more smoothly than I thought it would so far, so yeah. 42, I'll push a little longer, but my voice is kind of giving out. Hopefully we can hit a chapter break, or even a chapter end, but I feel like there might be quite a bit more to this chapter. I had sort of shared today's events with Satoshi, so I wanted to give it a quiet place to stay. That's how I felt. I started to feel more like returning to the locker from before, so it could continue to keep watch over Satoko.
Satoshi, 俺、多分お前のこと誤解してた。
Yeah, probably. Probably still don't know the whole truth about it, but closer than before. Satoshi listened quietly without nodding. I am absolutely convinced now. You were the one who beat your aunt to death last year and saved Satoko. I think that too. Also, we did hear a little... Can we hear Satoshi's voice if I go back far enough? Please? Okay, no. It's too late. But... So I'm pretty sure Satoshi doesn't have Keiichi's voice actor, because it sounded a lot higher pitched, so there's that. I don't know, they're making so much similarities between them. I wouldn't be surprised that he would have the same one, but there we go. I was joined you and called you a coward who ran away, but I was wrong. Wait, you were the one... Wait. Yeah, sure. I'm confused. To the rest of the world, some deviant was behind that incident, but I know. That was something you did for her. And then you disappeared. You finally got back that piece and lost it within days. So, I swear to you that I will live life to the fullest from now on. Live it enough for the both of us. I will live on as though this day never happened. But I will never forget the short time we shared together for as long as I live. I didn't know what expression Satoshi made as he listened. But as someone who had protected the same girl, I felt he had smiled and given me his blessing. And then, my hand moved on its own accord, and the bat I had hesitated to throw away left my hands and flew through the air. It traveled in a parabolic path, spinning all the while, and the swamp absorbed it without a sound. There weren't even any ripples when it hit the surface. That surface was whatever. I think we can assume what that means. Nah, don't be lazy, Aiden. Tempestuous. How do I spell it? Hello? There we go.
Tempestuous.
Tempestuous. Characterized by strong and turbulent or conflicting emotions, or very stormy.
Tempestuous.
Tempestuous. Ah, tempestuous. Yeah, like a tempest, right? I'm assuming. Yeah, so it's very stormy. The surface was tempestuous because of the downpour, and the bat was long gone. For a moment, I regret having thrown it. But I realized that might have been what Satoshi had wanted.
そうだよな。俺はまだ感傷に浸る余裕なんかないんだよな。
I would return my shovel, get on my bike, dig a hole to hide the body, and bury it. Don't forget to fill up your old hole. Ah. It seemed like a simple sequence of events, but I felt extremely exhausted, and I had to do it all tonight. Satoshi left me with only the advice I needed to finish this up soon. Then fell silent for eternity, and disappeared at the bottom of the demon's abyss. Can I get a chapter end? Alright, I'm gonna end it. When my voice gets shaky like that, I even have trouble reading stuff, but I think unless they do like a sudden twist, like what did they do? I think the worst thing that can happen is a character we actually care about sees Keiichi kind of doesn't necessarily have to figure out what he's doing, but just sees him. I think the worst would be like, well, obviously it would be a Uishi, but Uishi wouldn't be here. It'd probably be like Takano or Tomotaki. I guess those three would be the worst to appear, and most likely, or Satoko herself, since this is the path that they. Oh, it could be Satoko herself. That would actually be bad, but I don't think so. I'm not feeling it. Anyways, hopefully you enjoyed. We'll continue later. Pretty cool kill sequence. Though, if I had to, I mean, it's kind of a cool parallel from on the Kakashi where we were running away from being murdered, except Rena wasn't constantly hitting us with her cleaver. I still think Rena's was probably better, but this was cool experience with all this animal talk, kind of rationalizing that it was okay to kill the uncle when, you know, it's still a human life, not an animal life, even if he was a bad human. But again, hopefully you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. We'll continue this soon, and again, happy birthday to the channel. I'll give you a small clap. See you next time, guys and girls.